So, when I was looking through the Dungeon Master's Guide recently, searching for some new video ideas to put on my whiteboard, I saw something that I thought was kind of bad D&D advice. And when I saw that bad D&D advice get brought up again in a recent Ginny D video, I thought, gods, I have to cover this because it is unbelievable that this was printed in here. And that advice being that you should use the player character creation rules to create the NPCs in your Dungeons and Dragons game. This is, like I said, not good advice. It's bad practice for a variety of reasons, and it was quite shocking for me to see it in a book that shouldn't exactly be teaching you bad practice when it comes to DMing. Now, the designers of the book clearly agree with me because in the 2024 version of this book, they apparently removed this advice, and in my opinion, thank God. However, I am not the only person in the universe, and other people have their own opinions about this advice. Some people even think that this advice is not so bad, that using the character creation rules should be used for NPCs. Not just NPCs, but even your big bad evil guy. This was best showcased during Critical Role Campaign 3. Spoilers. But Matt Mercer in that campaign had a bad guy named Odahan Thule. And during the boss fight with Odahan Thule, she proved to be an insurmountable foe. She was an Echo Knight fighter who had fought all her life, a legendary warrior. And a lot of people did not like that. They didn't like how Odahan Thule's Echo Knight abilities worked differently from the base Echo Knight abilities that player characters have. She had too much health. She did too much damage. A lot of people complained that Matt Mercer was actually a hostile DM trying to kill his player characters. And there was even a popular post on the subreddit theorizing that Matt did an oopsie, that Odahan Thule's power levels were actually just a mistake, and that she was always meant to use the base level Echo Knight abilities used by every other player character. And I gotta say, this whole controversy and the entire idea that you should use character creation rules for things that are explicitly non-player characters is stupid, bad practice, and will make you a worse dungeon master. So, without further ado, guys, let's get into why. Okay, so why is this bad advice? Well, for starters, bloat. I don't know if you noticed, but the character sheet and a monster stat block in D&D and in the vast majority of other games, they look different. They look different in Pathfinder, they look different in Draw Steel, and they certainly look different in Dungeons & Dragons. This is for a very specific reason, that reason being that monster stat blocks need to be condensed. A dungeon master has to manage a whole lot of stuff, and having to manage all the stuff that's in a player character sheet is largely unnecessary. Stat blocks for monsters are also most frequently used only in combat. Like, yeah, sometimes I'll pull out a stat block to check a creature's insight, or maybe I'll see if this monster can cast scrying. But for the most part, I am only using this after we roll initiative. So if I have like an explorer's kit in there, it's largely unnecessary. Having to flip through all the pages of a character sheet will only make DMing so much more of a pain in the ass. Being able to prioritize and condense the abilities of a monster, even if it's still a massive stat block, is really helpful no matter what game you are playing. Another big issue with using the player character creation rules, and this might be a me thing, but if you want to improve as a game master, if you want to write your own stat blocks over time and build your own encounters, this is a crutch that's going to hold you back. Like, yes, using these rules can be helpful in some areas. Maybe you're using a spell as a template, or maybe you want to see how, like, stats will affect bonuses. However, for the most part, crutching hard on the character creation rules will prevent you from writing stuff that becomes your own material. It's one thing to use templates, and it's one thing to use these rules to generate something that they were never meant to generate. The rules of character creation were always meant to create player characters, no matter what the DM says about using them for non-player characters. God, that sentence makes no sense. I'm rolling my eyes as we speak. It's like learning math, but you're using the wrong equation. It's not going to help you. It's going to lead you astray. And overall, it might even screw you over in the long term. Look, I understand that not every dungeon master even wants to create their own creatures. You don't need to be a great DM or a great homebrewer or a game designer to be a fun DM at the table. You do you. You do what works. But if you do want to engage in like the game design elements of any RPG, crutching on character creation rules is not a good way to start that process. Okay, the next two reasons are the big two. First, gameplay-wise, it doesn't make sense for an NPC to use player character creation rules. You can only make a player character so powerful. And yes, in D&D especially, you can create some really powerful player characters. However, no matter how you make a really powerful level 20 wizard, that really powerful level 20 wizard may or may not struggle against a mid-level party. And by may or may not, I mean they're absolutely going to struggle against a mid-level party.
4 damage! My one weakness!
For starters, they're probably not going to have enough health to sustain a long encounter. Yeah, they might be able to do a lot of damage, but not enough to down 4 to 5 player characters. It's just ridiculous to expect, especially a big bad evil guy, to be restricted to the rules that player characters have. This is why I was so annoyed about the whole Owllock Duel controversy. So annoyed that I made an entire video about it. Of course, Owllock is different from the base level Echo Knight. Of course, Matt Mercer buffed her to hell. He is playing with 7 mid to high level player characters. 7 of them. This is upper echelon and counterbalance. You have to make a monster that can deal high damage, that has a shit ton of health, that can target a ton of different creatures. If you don't, your boss is going to be a joke. Now, going back to the original advice of the DMG, allies, I can see it a bit more, but you still run into the other two problems. Allied NPCs are, generally speaking, not going to be exponentially more powerful than player characters. In fact, usually, they shouldn't be exponentially stronger than the player characters. So in that case, I do see the sense in using player character guidelines at a base. However, like I said before, there are other issues with using a character sheet for NPCs that I've already talked about. Now, finally, it doesn't even really make sense from a narrative standpoint. Like, a lot of people got upset at me when I talked about this in the Owllock Duel video, and I'm sorry, I don't really understand why. This is just the truth. If you don't like it, I guess you could play a different game, but in D&D, and in the vast majority of RPGs, there's stuff that NPCs do that player characters just can't. Like, no matter how hard you put your mind into it, there is no rules as written way to raise an army of tens of thousands of undead like a big bad evil guy necromancer. There is no way for a wizard to become a lich, no matter how hard they put their mind to it. Narratively in modules, we encounter countless examples where archmages of all sorts do things that you just can't as a player character. And frankly, narratively, it's just cool for allied NPCs or for big bad evil guys to do things that are out there. Like, my player characters constantly encounter NPCs that have unique abilities that they've never seen before. A ranger that fights using a slingshot with runic magic exclusive to her, spells that no one else has. The player character saw that and thought that was really, really neat. And hell, there's no reason why you can't homebrew ways later on for player characters to get that capability. My paladin actually got access to some of those runic abilities I mentioned earlier by befriending that ranger and saving her girlfriend. The idea that we need to purely look at what a player character can do and enforce that across every character in the universe of your game is just so restricting, so dumb. It's not good for the story. It's not good for the mechanics. It doesn't make sense from just like a practical standpoint of reading the stat sheet. It's stupid. So stop doing it. You might be asking me, what's the alternative? Well, I've got you.
You know what's also just as good as proper encounter design? Today's sponsor!
This week's videos are sponsored by CZEPEKU tokens. This past year, I swapped my entire token library to use CZEPEKU tokens in my D&D games, and I could not be happier. Not only is the art absolutely gorgeous and so customizable, but also they take recommendations from their subscribers. They just released a massive bounty hunter pack with tons of tokens requested from the community. I've put in plenty of requests myself, and almost every single one of them has been made in like a week's time, which is very generous. Yes, CZEPEKU are typically known for their super inexpensive and expansive map library, but slowly, CZEPEKU tokens is becoming just as good for me, if not even better. If you guys are interested, you can head down into the description down below or to the pinned comment where you can click buy a link so that you can grab CZEPEKU tokens or CZEPEKU maps on their Patreon. As always, supporting our sponsors does support us. Thank you so much to CZEPEKU for sponsoring today's episode. And without further ado, back to class. For starters, I can give you a TLDR on how I create stat blocks. Guys, I'm not a game designer. I am not like Matt Colville. I have not spent years at game studios learning how to write, how to design, how to balance game. All I have is a couple of years of experience and my home D&D game along with some streams. That is it. However, I've still had a ton of fun making my own monsters and, based on my player character's reception, a good amount of success. Okay, so step one of my process is generally look at a monster that I really like. Look, I said earlier it's okay to use player characters as like a template. However, I don't think that's best practice. What's best practice is using an NPC or a monster as a template. I mean, you are making an NPC stat block. Use an NPC as your baseline. Generally speaking, I go to Flea Mortals because the action-oriented game design methods that MCDM and Matt Colville use, they are the methods that I prefer. But use whatever you want. Maybe the new 2024 Monster Manual, which actually has a template system built directly in when it comes to humanoid stat blocks. So yeah, there you go. Look, no matter what you use, look at those already established monsters and find the numbers that matter. The amount of damage they do per round. Calculate that out. Look at their multi-attack, look at their damage averages, and use that as your base. I usually just copy paste the numbers because I want to get them in there first. From there, I start adjusting. If the attacks deal some sort of status condition, I might lower the numbers to accommodate for that. If I want this to be a really difficult threat that's going against more player characters, or maybe I'm throwing some NPCs into the mix, I might raise their damage or raise their health or raise their stats to accommodate for that too. If it's a monster that's going against the player characters alone, you want a ton of health, high armor class, and lots of area of effect spell. This is what Matt did with Odahan Thule. She had multiple effects that did high single target damage, yes, but also spread the damage among the player characters. Remember, when you start downing PCs, it radically adjusts the balance of a fight. Having to bring a player character back from the brink and wasting your action economy to do so is going to change the direction of a fight, so keep that in mind when you're designing your monster. The important thing is, use creatures that you know work. I've been DMing for only 6 years, but in that time, I've used a lot of monsters, especially from Flea Mortals, Matt Colville, and MCDM's Monster Manual. I know those creatures work. I know their numbers check out against my player character. I use those as my base, and then work from there. It's not a short process. It does take a while, but it's worth it to create something memorable. And again, you don't need to completely abandon the established mechanics of whatever game you're playing. Every once in a while, I'll look at a 6th level spell that I haven't seen before for upper echelon monsters, and I'll be like, hey, With some changes, the 6th level spell could work really well as a recharge mechanic similar to a Dragon's Breath attack. Also, keep in mind the power of reskins. A bandit captain could be your party's next best friend by just reskinning that bandit captain to be a rough and tumble guard captain instead that uses more dirty fighting techniques. That is a really good idea if you don't want to mess with all like the game design nonsense. But I do recommend you at least try some of that game design nonsense. I've gotten really good with homebrewing D&D monsters for my party. I can do it pretty quick now. It's still work, but it's really fun. And like I said earlier, it's extremely rewarding when I have my player characters enjoying something that I personally wrote. And the more you do it, the more you're gonna learn. Like when people ask me how I balance my harder D&D encounters, I don't really know, man. I just kind of vibe it out. Like, I know my player characters really well. I've had these characters in my campaign every single week for 2 years. I know Shanks, I know Dusk, I know what they can do, and I know what they can't. And therefore, I can just kind of vibe out how to balance an encounter. I'm sorry I don't really have a precise mathematical equation for how to build monsters, how to create encounters, how to create NPCs, because honestly, it's experience. But you're not going to get that experience if you never try. You're not going to get that experience if you constantly think that just using the base level fighter is going to be a good idea for an NPC. It's going to be inconvenient in the moment, and it stops you from doing something that, in my opinion, is a really fun part of Dungeons and Dragons and all TTRPGs. But yeah, there you go. That's my DMing pet peeve that I'm tired of seeing. I hope I nailed this one down for good. However, I have a feeling I'm still going to see a pop-up in an RPG horror story now and then. What can you do? In any case, if you guys enjoyed, you might enjoy The 10th Tomb, our D&D actual play. It's a lot of fun. It's linked in the cards. And we have a spin-off coming this week on this channel. So if you want to subscribe to Crispy's Academy, now is the best time. But before you do either of those things, please leave a like, and hey, comment down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment pet peeve till I'm moving to the end of the video. But hey, in essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell. Use player character creation rules for something that is explicitly a non-player character.